3 true Craigslist marketplace horror stories. There's a version of an online marketplace transaction that plays out cleanly every single day. Someone has something they do not need. Someone else needs that exact thing. They agree on a price. They meet. The item changes hands. Both of them go home and get on with their lives and never think about each other again. Clean, simple, completely forgettable. That is the version most people have experienced. But the marketplace does not screen for intent. It does not know the difference between someone who wants your old dining table and someone who wants a reason to be inside your house. It does not know the difference between a motivated buyer and someone for whom the item is beside the point entirely. Tonight I have 3 stories from 3 real people who found out what lives on the other side of that distinction. A woman selling a car who discovered the buyer had been watching her for weeks before he ever sent a message. A man who sold a laptop and spent the following month trying to understand how the buyer had found his workplace without ever being given that information. And a couple who listed free moving boxes on a quiet Sunday morning and spent the next 4 days inside something they did not have a name for until a neighbor's security camera gave them one. 3 listings, 3 transactions that went somewhere none of these people were prepared for. These are 3 true Craigslist marketplace horror stories. If this is your first time on this channel, subscribe before this is over. Because all 3 of these stories start somewhere ordinary and end somewhere you will not stop thinking about. Story 1, The Car Buyer. My name is Vanessa Pruitt. I am 31 years old and I live in Tucson, Arizona, and I want to tell you about the 6 weeks it took me to sell a car on Craigslist and about the man who made those 6 weeks the most unsettling period of my adult life. Not because he was violent, not because anything physically happened, but because by the time I understood what was going on, I also understood how long it had been going on, and those 2 things together are what I still cannot fully put down. The car was a 2016 Honda Civic, silver, clean interior, low mileage. For its age, priced at $11,500. I had bought a newer vehicle and was selling the Civic privately to avoid the dealership trade-in gap. I knew the car was priced fairly, and I expected it to move within 2 or 3 weeks. I posted on Craigslist on a Thursday in September with 12 photos and a thorough description. I used my cell number in the listing because I wanted serious buyers to be able to call directly. I got 11 calls and texts over the first 4 days. Most of them were lowball offers or people who wanted me to take a deposit and hold the car for weeks while they arranged financing. One man who said his name was Kevin called on the Saturday after I listed. He was soft-spoken and asked intelligent questions about the service history and whether the car had ever been in an accident. He did not make an offer on the phone. He said he would like to come see it in person and asked what my schedule looked like. We arranged a Sunday viewing at my home. I gave him my address. Stay with me, because the first strange thing did not happen during that Sunday meeting. It happened 3 days before it. On Thursday evening, the night I posted the listing, I was walking my dog around my neighborhood at around 7:30. My neighborhood is a standard residential area, single-family homes, wide streets, quiet in the evenings. As I was turning back toward my house, I noticed a car parked on the street about 4 houses down from mine. A dark gray sedan engine, off no one visibly inside from the distance I was at. I walk that route every evening, and I pay attention to which cars belong and which ones are new. That car had not been there the previous evenings. I noted it and kept walking and did not think more about it. Friday evening, same walk, same route. The dark gray sedan was in a different position now, about 2 houses down from mine rather than 4. Still no one visible inside. I stopped walking for a moment and looked at it. A dog pulling on a leash in the dark is not the moment to stand still and stare at a parked car, so I kept moving. But I noted the change in position. Saturday evening, the night before Kevin's scheduled visit, the sedan was not on the street. I was relieved in the way you are relieved when something that was bothering you goes away before you had to act on it. Kevin arrived Sunday at 11 in the morning in a dark gray sedan. I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment. Not alarm, not certainty, something more ambiguous and harder to act on. A gray sedan is not an unusual vehicle. Parking on a residential street is not a suspicious behavior. A buyer coming to look at a car you have listed for sale is not alarming. Every individual piece of information had an innocent explanation. The pieces together formed something I could not name clearly enough to say out loud. So I said nothing. Kevin looked at the car for 40 minutes. He was thorough and knowledgeable. He checked things I would not have known to check, and asked me things I had to look up in the service records. He did not make an offer. He said he wanted to think about it and would be in touch. He was polite, unhurried, gave off nothing that a reasonable person would point to as specifically concerning. He drove away in his gray sedan. He texted that evening to say he was still interested and asked a few follow-up questions about the registration history. I answered. He thanked me. Over the following week, he texted 4 more times. Each text was framed as a follow-up question, but each one also included something small and conversational. A comment about the weather in Tucson that week. A mention of a road he said he drove often that was near my neighborhood. A question about whether I was flexible on the price that included a detail about seeing the car from a distance and thinking it looked good in the afternoon light. Seeing the car from a distance, I kept that phrase and held it. My car was in my garage. I only brought it out when I was going somewhere or when I had a showing. Kevin had not had another showing. The only way he could have seen the car from a distance in the afternoon light was from outside my property from the street, during a period when the garage door was open. I started paying attention to the street in a way I had not before. I had a neighbor named Patricia across the street who had a video doorbell, the kind that captures a wide field of view, including a section of the road in front of her house. I knocked on her door on a Tuesday afternoon and explained that I was selling my car and was having some concerns about a potential buyer. I asked if I could take a look at the past week of footage from her doorbell. She said, of course, and pulled it up on her tablet at her kitchen table. In 7 days of footage, the dark gray sedan appeared on my street 6 times. 3 of those appearances were drive-bys where the vehicle slowed to near stop as it passed my driveway and then continued. 2 were parked stays, both in the evening, one for 22 minutes and one for 37, in positions that had a direct line of sight to my driveway and the front of my house. The 6th appearance was on Sunday morning, arriving 11 minutes before Kevin knocked on my door. I called Tucson police that same evening and filed a report. I provided Patricia's doorbell footage, the screenshots of Kevin's text messages, and the timeline I had assembled from my own walking observations and her camera. The officer who took the report told me that what I had was significant and that the combination of the pre-visit surveillance, the positioning of the vehicle, and the message containing the reference to seeing the car from a distance formed a pattern worth documenting formally. He asked for Kevin's phone number from the texts. He told me not to respond to any further messages and not to arrange any additional showings. The phone number Kevin had used traced back to a prepaid device. His full identity was ultimately established through a combination of the vehicle plates captured on Patricia's footage and a cross-check with a prior contact in the Pima County database. He was 44 years old and lived in a part of Tucson about 12 miles from my neighborhood. He had a prior civil restraining order from 6 years earlier filed by a woman in Phoenix. The details of that order were not shared with me. He was contacted by detectives and issued a formal warning with documentation. No criminal charges were filed based on the evidence available at that point. I was told that if any further contact occurred, I should report it immediately, and that the existing documentation would support a stronger response. I sold the Civic 3 weeks later to a couple I met in the parking lot of a Starbucks in broad daylight. I sent them the Carfax beforehand. They drove it in a loop around the shopping center. We signed the title transfer on a bench outside and they drove away happy. I watched them go and felt the specific relief of a clean ending. I no longer list my personal cell number on any marketplace posting. I use a free second line app that generates a number disconnected from any information about who I am or where I live. I arrange all showings in public or at the minimum with another person present. I have a motion activated camera on my driveway now. Patricia still has her doorbell camera, and we have an informal arrangement to share footage when either of us has a reason. The thing I come back to most is Thursday evening, the night I posted the listing. The gray sedan on the street 4 houses down. If I had not been someone who noticed which cars belonged on my street, I would have had no reason to connect it to Kevin at all. It would have just been a car. And Patricia's footage would have sat on a 2-week loop and recorded over itself, and none of the pattern would have been visible. The surveillance he conducted before he ever sent a message would have been invisible. He knew where I lived before he called me. The listing had my phone number, not my address. He had found my address through the listing, and he had been to my street before he made contact. That is what the Thursday sedan means. That is the piece I stayed with the longest. Story 2, The Laptop Buyer. My name is Aaron Diaz. I am 28 years old, and I was living in Nashville, Tennessee, when I sold a refurbished laptop on Craigslist for $320. This was about 20 months ago, and it was the most straightforward transaction I've ever had on that platform. The buyer showed up on time, checked the machine quickly, and competently paid cash, said, "Thank you," and left. 3 minutes total. No strange behavior, no odd questions, no feeling of anything wrong. The feeling of something wrong came 31 days later. Before I get to that, comment below and tell me if you have ever sold something online and wondered afterward what you actually handed over along with the item. Stay with me, because what was on that laptop was not the problem. The problem was what the buyer did outside of it. The buyer's username on Craigslist was TechDeals2022, and he had communicated entirely through the platform's internal messaging before the sale. No external contact, no phone number exchanged, no personal details beyond an agreement on time and my address. His name, which he told me at the door, was Marcus. He was in his mid-30s, wore a tech company branded hoodie, examined the laptop with the practiced efficiency of someone who bought and resold electronics regularly. He opened the device, checked the boot time, verified the specs matched my listing, and paid. Done. A week after the sale, I got a package in the mail addressed to me at my home address. It was a laptop charger, the universal adapter type. Nothing I had ordered. No return address on the package, just a commercial shipping label from an online retailer with my name and address printed correctly. I assumed it was a mislabeled package meant for someone else, or a gift from a family member who had forgotten to mention it. I set it aside. 2 weeks after that, I was at my workplace, a marketing agency in Midtown Nashville. I worked standard business hours, and the office had a glass front that was visible from the street and from the visitor parking area. On a Wednesday afternoon, my coworker Maya stopped by my desk and said there was a man in the visitor lot who had been sitting in his car for a while and appeared to be looking at the building. She mentioned it only because she had gone out to her own car twice that afternoon, and the car had still been there on both trips, same position, engine running. I went to the front window and looked. A sedan in the visitor lot, dark-colored engine running, no one getting out. I watched for about a minute and then the car pulled out and left. I would not have connected it to anything if it had not happened again the following Tuesday. Same visitor lot, different time of day, mid-morning. I went outside this time. The car was still there. I walked toward it at a deliberate pace. The car pulled out when I was about 20 feet away and drove off before I could see the driver clearly or read the full plate. I got the first 3 characters. That evening, I thought about the 2 unexplained occurrences in the package and I tried to construct a connection. The package with my home address could have come from anyone with access to that address. My address was not a secret. It was linked to public records accessible to anyone who looked. The car in the visitor lot could have been there for any of the other businesses in the building. My workplace was not listed anywhere publicly that I could identify as connected to my personal information, except for one place. When I had originally created my Craigslist account years earlier, I had filled in a profile section that I had since forgotten about. It was not publicly displayed prominently, but it was accessible if someone navigated to my profile page from our message thread. In that profile, I had at some point listed my employer for a reason I could no longer recall, possibly during a period when I'd been using the job section and had included it as a credential. The field was visible. It named my employer. It named the street the office was on. Marcus had my home address from the listing. He had my employer from my profile. He had everything he needed to know where I slept and where I worked. I went to Nashville Police on a Thursday morning and filed a report. I brought the package, the shipping label, my phone with the Craigslist message thread, and the 3 characters I had noted from the car's plate. I also brought a screenshot of my Craigslist profile showing the employer field and a description of the 2 parking lot incidents with dates and times. The officer took everything and said the profile employer field combined with the contact pattern was significant enough to warrant follow-up. I also went into my Craigslist account that same day and deleted every populated field in my profile section and changed my display settings to the most restricted options available. I should have done that years earlier. The profile section of a marketplace account is the part almost nobody thinks about after they set it up. It just sits there, visible, attached to every message thread you have ever had on the platform. A detective called me 12 days after I filed the report. She told me the plate characters I'd provided combined with the description of the vehicle and the time frame had been cross-referenced and had produced a match. She told me the registered owner of the vehicle was a man whose name did not match Marcus, but whose profile, when investigated, included a history of Craigslist activity in the Nashville metro area as a buyer of electronics. She told me he had been contacted and that a formal warning had been issued. She asked me to continue documenting any further incidents. There were no further incidents after the detective's contact. No more packages, no car in the visitor lot. Clean stop, which is what a formal warning from law enforcement sometimes produces. But here's the part I want you to actually hear. I sold a laptop. I exchanged cash for hardware in a 3-minute interaction on my doorstep. I did not give Marcus my employer. I did not give him anything beyond the address necessary to complete the transaction. He assembled everything he needed from the fragments I had scattered across a public platform without realizing they were connected to each other. The home address from the listing, the employer from the profile field I had filled out and forgotten, the transaction thread that linked them under one account. Every piece of information you have ever put into a marketplace account is potentially visible to everyone who has ever messaged you, not because the platform designed it maliciously, because it never occurred to most people to treat a profile field the same way they treat a door they would not leave open. Not. Go into your marketplace accounts tonight. Look at what is in your profile. Look at what you filled in and forgot, and then decide whether you are comfortable with a stranger reading it. Story 3, The Free Boxes. My name is Daniel Osi, and my wife's name is Priya. We are both 30 years old, and this happened in Sacramento, California, about 14 months ago in the middle of a Saturday morning that started out being the most mundane possible day. We had just finished a local move from a 2-bedroom apartment to a 3-bedroom rental house about 4 miles away, and we had a substantial collection of used moving boxes that we no longer needed. Good condition, various sizes, the kind that sell for real money new, but that anyone who has just moved will give away happily to avoid dealing with disposal. Priya posted a listing on Craigslist that morning. Free moving boxes, approximately 40 pieces, all sizes, must take all available today, only pickup, at our new address between 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. She included her cell number for quick coordination since we wanted the boxes gone in a single transaction that day. The listing went up at 9:15. By 9:40, we had 7 responses. The first person who confirmed they could come that morning and take all 40 boxes was a man who said his name was Frank. He said he was moving the following weekend and the timing was perfect. Priya confirmed and gave him our address. He said he would be there at 10:30. If you are listening to this right now with that familiar feeling of already knowing where this goes, stay with me. Because the part of this story that is hardest to explain is not what Frank did when he arrived. It is what we found on a neighbor's camera 4 days later, and what it showed us about what Frank had already done before Priya posted the listing. Frank arrived at 10:28 in a pickup truck. He was in his 50s, compact and efficient in his movements, wearing work gloves already when he got out of the truck. He introduced himself with a handshake and started loading boxes without any small talk. He was systematic about it, breaking them flat and stacking them in the truck bed in a way that suggested he had loaded a lot of boxes before. We helped him, and between the 3 of us, it took about 25 minutes to get everything loaded. He thanked us, said good luck with the new house, and left. The whole interaction was practical and unremarkable. We went back inside. Priya made coffee. I started unpacking the kitchen. By noon, I had genuinely stopped thinking about the boxes or Frank entirely. The first thing that brought it back was a conversation I had Tuesday morning with our neighbor across the street. His name was George, 62 years old, retired, and he had one of those wide-angle doorbell cameras that captured a good section of the street, in addition to his own path. George had come over on Monday evening to introduce himself, and we had exchanged numbers the way new neighbors sometimes do. On Tuesday morning, he texted and asked if we had company on Saturday morning before 10. He said his camera had picked up a vehicle on the street from around 8:45 to 9:10, parked directly in front of our house, that had not moved in during that time, and that he had not recognized as belonging to anyone on the street. Priya posted the listing at 9:15. The vehicle George described was on our street from 8:45 to 9:10. 25 minutes of sitting in front of our house before any listing existed, before Frank had any reason to know our address. I asked George if I could see the footage. He pulled it up on his phone in his driveway. The vehicle was a pickup truck. We could not determine the color definitively from the footage quality, but it was light-toned. Frank's truck had been silver. In the footage, the truck was parked with the engine running visible from the exhaust in the cool morning air. No one got out. At 9:10, it pulled away and turned left at the end of the street. Frank arrived at 10:28 in a pickup truck that Priya had directed him to our address via text at 9:45. He had been on our street at 8:45, 90 minutes before Priya texted him our address. He had our address before we gave it to him. I sat with that for a long time. I walked through how it was possible. Our new address was on our lease, which was a private document. It was not yet linked to our names on any public record because we had just moved. Our Priya's cell number was what she had included in the listing, not our address. Frank could not have found our address from the listing because the listing had not existed when his truck was on our street. There are two explanations I've been able to construct. The first is that Frank had been monitoring new moving box listings in Sacramento with enough regularity that he had somehow anticipated the listing through a combination of visual scouting of recently moved-in households in the area looking for taped-up boxes on porches or moving debris, and had identified our house that morning as a likely source before the listing went up. He had sat in front of our house on speculation, and then the listing appeared at 9:15 confirming what he had already guessed, and he had responded immediately as the first contact, knowing the address he was responding about. This explanation requires a level of deliberate, systematic effort that is alarming in its own right, even if the motivation behind it was only to get free boxes. The second explanation is that Frank already knew who we were, knew where we had moved, and used the listing as a cover mechanism to make a legitimate reason to come to the house and come inside it in a context where we would welcome him and watch him work through our property and think nothing of the transaction afterward. I do not know which explanation is correct. I have told this story to other people, and they have proposed a third option, that the timing was a coincidence and the truck was someone else entirely. That is possible. I cannot rule it out. But a pickup truck parked in front of our house for 25 minutes. The same morning, a listing for free moving boxes went up, followed by that listing's first respondent arriving in a pickup truck, is a coincidence with enough weight to it that I could not set it down. We reported the footage and the timeline to Sacramento police on Wednesday. The officer who came out was straightforward and told me that without a plate number from the 8:45 footage, which the camera angle had not captured, and without any overt threatening behavior from Frank, during the Saturday interaction, the report would be documented, but was unlikely to lead to an active investigation. He told me to be vigilant about who I gave my address to going forward. He checked whether our new address was yet associated with our names in any public database, and confirmed it was not. The question of how Frank or whoever was in that truck knew where we lived remains open. We have not found an answer that fully satisfies. What we did find when we dug through the settings on various accounts Priya had used to coordinate the move was that she had used our new address as a delivery address on a shipping account she had made 3 weeks before the move in anticipation of setting things up. That account was connected to a profile that was associated with her cell number. A person who had her cell number and sufficient motivation could have potentially traced the cell number to the account and the account to the delivery address. It is a long chain. But chains like that exist, and people who follow them have demonstrated that they follow them for a reason. We installed a camera on our front porch within the week. George's doorbell footage is something we check when anything feels different on the street, and we do not post our home address in any public marketplace listing. We use a parking lot at a nearby grocery store as our designated exchange point for everything, now boxes or furniture or anything else we want gone. It adds 10 minutes to the transaction, and it means Strangers never have a reason to stand in our driveway. 40 free moving boxes, that was the item. That was the entire thing. And what came with them was 4 days of a question we could not fully answer, and a neighbor's camera that showed us a timeline that has not stopped bothering either of us since the morning George texted and asked if we had company before 10. We keep the porch camera on a motion alert. Every time it sends a notification, I check it before I look at anything else on my phone. Priya does the same. It has become the first thing we do in the morning and the last thing we check before we go to sleep. That is what 40 free boxes cost us. Not the boxes, the habit of watching, the habit we cannot seem to put down even now that we have told ourselves many times that it is probably fine. Probably is a word that works in a lot of situations. It does not work very well at 2 in the morning when the motion alert goes off and you are already awake. Outro. 3 stories. 3 transactions that should have ended the moment the item changed hands. A silver Civic that brought a buyer who had already been to the street before he made contact. A laptop that gave a stranger enough fragments to locate a workplace never shared in any message. A free box listing that brought a truck that was already there before the listing existed. All 3 of these situations lived in the specific gap between what a marketplace transaction appears to be and what it can become in the hands of someone who has decided to use it differently than it was designed to be used. Vanessa thought she was selling a car. Brian thought he was selling a laptop. Daniel and Priya thought they were clearing out boxes before noon. None of them were wrong about the transaction itself, but the transaction was not all that was happening. The detail that stays with me from Vanessa's story is Thursday evening. A gray sedan on the street the same night the listing went live, before Kevin had ever called, before he had any public record of her address. He had found it before he made contact, and he had gone to see it. That is not a buyer. That is someone who has already decided something and is in the process of confirming it. The detail that stays with me from Aaron's story is the profile field. One line in an account he had filled out years earlier and stopped thinking about. An employer name on a street address in Nashville, sitting open and readable inside every message thread he had ever had on the platform. Invisible to him, not invisible to Marcus. The detail that stays with me from Danielle and Priya's story is 9:10. The truck pulled away at 9:10. Priya posted the listing at 9:15. The 5 minutes between those 2 times is not an answer. It is just the number you are left with when you have assembled everything you can find, and it still does not close all the way. Check your marketplace profiles. Look at every field. Look at what you put in years ago and have not thought about since. Remove anything that connects your account to your employer, your neighborhood, your physical location, or your routine. Use a second line number app for listing communications. Meet strangers in public locations. Tell someone where you're going. None of these steps take more than a few minutes, and none of them cost more than the time it takes to do them. And pay attention to the cars on your street that you do not recognize, not with paranoia, with the kind of casual awareness that most people turn off because they have decided it is not necessary. It is necessary. It has always been necessary. The people in these 3 stories found that out the hard way so that you do not have to. Leave a comment below and tell me which of these 3 reached you the most. Subscribe if you want true scary stories every single week. And the next time you list something online, take 30 seconds before you hit post and ask yourself exactly how much of your life is readable in what you are about to publish. Because a listing is not just information about an item. In the right hands or the wrong ones, it is information about you.